everyone, and welcome back. Okay, so I'm going to recap what we talked about in the last part. So I told my dad's girlfriend some hard truths about him, about the past, how he had lied, how he had not really been a present father, all of those types of things. I'd had a very honest conversation with her about it. In the process of this, I was trying to actively help him, right, get through some of the medical healthcare stuff, and even following up with doctors about things like, why is he still in a neck brace? Does he need to be? Can we do MRIs? Can we do x-rays? Those types of things. And he was actively working against me. He was actively undermining me kind of at every single step. I would be asking him questions because we're trying to fill out paperwork for his insurance, and he would tell me the opposite of something that was true. I don't know if, and again, don't know if that's because of pride or what it was, but actively undermining me at every single turn whenever I was trying to help him. And I was dealing with quite a few of his different faces while we were in the hospital, but most of the time it was anger and it was pain because he was in a lot of pain, and so he was lashing out a lot. All right, so I try to keep these videos pretty short. I know it may not seem like it, but I try to keep them under 30 minutes. I'm not sure how much of these like receipts I'm going to be able to get through in a setting like staying under 30 minutes. So I may have to split this into two parts or a couple of parts, just because, again, I'm trying to keep it shorter. So, okay. So my dad's been in the hospital for days at this point. He seems like he's mostly on the other side. You know, he had the procedure. It was successful. There's no signs that his stroke is getting any worse. There's no signs that anything else is getting any worse. At this point, he's just, you know, still has weakness on the one side and still has loss of vision, but the weakness is actually seeming to recede a little bit because he's able to feel certain things. If somebody's touching him on that leg, he seems like he's able to feel it. He had a lot of involuntary movement, which is good. Those are good signs. And also his speech wasn't really impacted, which was also a really good sign. So we felt like he was mostly on the other side of it at this point. The main primary problem and thing that we were focusing on was that he needed to be on a blood thinner to make sure he didn't have another stroke. But you're not allowed to start a blood thinner until you're 2 weeks out from that sort of a stroke and that sort of a procedure. And the reason is because, again, when you have a stroke, it's because a clot usually has been thrown to your brain, and it causes like a blockage and causes a stroke, right? So that's why you need a blood thinner, to make sure that you don't throw clots. However, if you've already done that, and there's been a procedure and that sort of a thing, and it's caused somewhat of a brain bleed, if you start a blood thinner, it could cause the brain bleed to get potentially much, much worse, which could cause all sorts of other issues. So they make you wait about 2 weeks before you start a blood thinner. So we had to wait till we got to that point. But again, for the most part, he seemed pretty stable. They were going to keep him in the hospital and observe him and watch him all through that time. So I wasn't super concerned about it because, again, if there was something that was starting to come, if it seemed like he was having any sort of symptoms of a stroke, we would know. He's hooked up to monitors, he's being watched, you know, that sort of thing. So I felt pretty secure and stable that we were on the other side of this at this point. And so mind you, again, I just gotten a few hours of sleep. I threw myself together and went to the hospital because I was trying to spend as much time there as possible before I left for Aruba with my boyfriend. So, you know, I wanted to make sure that I was able to kind of get all the ducks in the row. There were a lot of questions and things that needed to be followed up on and answered, especially with my dad's healthcare, as far as like, you know, does he have a fracture or does he not? If he doesn't have a fracture, does he need to wear a neck brace still? You know, like those types of questions. Like there were certain questions that needed to be asked and followed up on. And so I wanted to make sure that I like left the family in a good place with like a list with the ability to ask those questions and to kind of follow up, that I was able to give the nurses like, hey, I'm not going to be here, but my mom will be here. And so in the meantime, while I'm not here, please contact her. I was trying to make sure that all those ducks were in a row. Okay, so I show up to the hospital, right? And my dad, sleeping, looks peaceful like a little angel, all right? I look over, his girlfriend, not happy. It is like emanating off of her in waves. She is super not happy. So we're sitting there and she starts to talk to me and she tells me that she went through my dad's phone. Now, I understand that that is a controversial thing to do, right? I'm not throwing any shade or any stones, and you'll see why in a second. But I understand that some people have a lot of strong feelings about people and partners going through their phones and things like that. But like, to be fair, my dad definitely gave her permission to do that. He told her to take his phone. He even asked her to look up specific things on his phone. Gave her the password and everything. So to be fair, I don't know if he like, it seemed like he kind of gave her like carte blanche to do what she wanted. So I don't know if he wanted to get caught. I don't know if he just didn't think about it. I don't know what exactly all that was about. But either way you slice it, she went through his phone. So she found out that he had been talking to several other women at least. Okay. And she shows me some of the texts that she'd come across. As I'm kind of progressively scrolling through these, I'm feeling more and more sick to my stomach. It really feels like I'm reading junior higher text messages, you know, like how it's just all so dramatic and kind of like life and death. I mean, no offense to them, seriously, and junior hires. I mean, I'm speaking about junior hires, no offense to them. But yeah, so anyway, I'm watching women fall for this progressively more and more. And I know exactly what he's doing. I've known him my whole life, obviously, you know, I've been there. So I know what he's doing when I'm reading these text messages. I know exactly what sort of an emotion he is trying to elicit from these people. You know, I have very, very vivid memories of him doing things like that. Even when I was younger, using me as a prop, those types of things. Like when my parents had divorced, you know, he would come by occasionally, like when he would come by, and he would take me out to McDonald's for like lunch or something like that. And so we would go to McDonald's and we would be standing there and they'd be like, okay, like what do you want to eat? And he'd ask me and I would go to answer and then he'd cover my mouth and then he'd start talking. Of course, the person behind the counter goes, ah, and starts giggling, right? Because, oh my God, that's so funny. And then, you know, he's now, bam, charmed you and he's getting your number. Like my dad is like that. Okay. So like I've seen him from the beginning. I know all of his tricks, but I'm watching him use all of these tricks, but just a little bit more sophisticated now, right? Because he's older and there's technology involved and he has, you know, all this other stuff. So I'm watching him use these tricks on women and they're falling for it. And it is like hurting my heart. So yeah, I start to help his girlfriend. I start to help her. And she, cause you know, she was going through individual text messages and like looking through that way. And I told her, you know, the fastest and most efficient way is for you to just search your name. Okay. Don't ask me how I know, but that is the fastest and most efficient way to find what you're looking for. So just type your name into the search bar and it'll show all of the text messages that he has ever sent that have mentioned your name in them. And you can look at them all in one page and then you can click on each one of them and then it'll put you right there so you can read the context around it. It's a lot easier, a lot more efficient, okay? Where instead of just going through every single person or anyone who looks like a woman, like that's a lot of work, okay? So, she searches for her name. We find out that my dad was messing around on her since the beginning, which was a really rough thing to find out, because again, he's sitting there talking about her and her name's popping up in these messages. And so he's actively talking about how he's messing around on her. So I have printed out receipts so I can read these messages verbatim and we can all collectively roast him. Okay. Don't feel bad about it. I think he deserves it. I'm giving you permission, because these messages are truly heinous levels of cringe. So, yeah, go off. All right. I'm going to change the names. If I mention names at all, I'll probably try to avoid mentioning names and I'm not going to, cause I don't want to dox anybody. Okay. So I'm going to heavily kind of edit and redact this, and not put any, try not to put any identifying information in that you could, you know, obviously. Okay. So, my primary focus here again is my dad. It's not the people that he was messaging, not these, you know, women who he was messaging. It's my dad. Like that's what we're trying to focus on here. So we're going to play a little game of spot the narcissist. All right. Obviously it's not formally diagnosed narcissism or any of that other stuff. And I know that term is super overused. But I think the point still stands, and so stick with me, all right? I'm going to do a dramatic reading through these text messages, and then we're going to, I'm going to give you some red flags that you need to look out for, all right? I'm sure you'll be able to pick up on them as I'm reading through it, but I'm going to try to just put them in a nice little list for you so you can pick up on those when you're going through your regular life. All right, here we go. He says to this woman, "I'm glad you forgave me, and you're speaking to I once again. My life was pretty boring without you." This emoji, this emoji, this emoji. And then she said, "Next time I'll go stalk you." And he said, I kind of wished you did. I've never been stalked before. And then she laughed. And then she said, now I know, LOL. And he said, I kind of might have liked that. Winky face, winky face, winky face. And then she said, no, you were scared, so you ran away. He said, you know you missed me. Be honest. And then she said, you missed me. And then he said, I missed our late night conversations. I missed hearing you. I missed not being able to tell you I was hurt and couldn't let you know. Definitely missed ya. Wow, I don't hear you anymore. Sin palabras, lo lamento. He does not speak Spanish. Again, I tell you, this man is 100% American Samoan, all right? There's not even a little bit of Hispanic in there. There's no. Okay. Anyway. And then there's more text messages. He says, you could be right. I've been known to be wrong several times. I never had anyone else challenge me on my thinking. And then she said, why have the need for a challenge equals toxic trait I see? And he said, so you're challenging I? No toxicity here, just good vibes. And then she said, toxicity, sir. I don't have energy to challenge anyone. You are who you are, and only you can change that. Challenging you would mean I would want to change you, which I will not. Burn. Then she said, like I said, why do that? You get into your mind a little too much. Loosen up, sir. And then he said, because peoples expect that from me. They need me to be the strong one, to be the level-headed one, to have all the answers. And sometimes I just freaking don't. You know, I thought if I could disappear and just go away, no one would know or truly even care. In my mentals daily, I have to be. I am loose, I think. This emoji, this emoji, this emoji. People expect me to blah, blah. Everyone expects something, so lose yourself, is what she said to him. Good on ya. Then he said, it is hard, my friend. I hate always having to be the good guy, you know, being strong all the time. Anxiety, huh? I do have a remedy for that also. And then she said, so you're tired of being the good guy. You have heard of integrity, right? LOL. Does that mean nothing to you? Screw that everyone else is screw what everyone else is doing. My mom taught me to get through this naturally, so if it's drugs, then no, huh? And he said, no drugs here. I understand. Trust me, I do. But it just sucks always trying to be the good guy. ... And your madre was a very strong and determined woman. And then he sent a message, I spent this Mother's Day with my mom, sent a picture of his mom's grave site to this woman. It said, Miss, her name, meet my mother. Mom, the lady's name, mi madre. And then she said, you showed me pictures when she was alive, and thank you very much. What do you mean you're tired of being a good guy? Who gets tired of that, LOL? Right? Then he says, you know who gets tired? I do, ma'am, ... You know what? It's crazy and too complicated. Not saying you wouldn't understand. I just hate it. Yeah. And then more conversations later on. These are just the highlights of the ones I found to be the most cringy, but also the ones that were like kind of the most egregious because he had a girlfriend during this time, like a whole girlfriend during this time. And then he said, I've wanted to be with you since I first met you. Something drew me to you, and to this day, I don't have the slightly clue what it is, ... I mean, I saw you at the funeral, and I froze, to be honest, but I didn't know what you wanted, so I backed up a lot, and I didn't want to frighten you off, ... Okay, there, I said it, ... I didn't want you in my life. I needed you in my life. I just didn't know how to express it, ... You don't have to reply also if you wish not to. And then she said, which this is the most epic response I've ever seen, I do that to a lot of people. I'm amazing. What can I say? I just imagine she flipped her hair. Anyway, epic. My dad said, what? You asked me to tell you the real and that's what I get in response? I'm sure he was so triggered that he spent all that time trying to type up something that he thought was gonna... Anyway, hilarious. Then there was this time when my dad was trying to... So like basically the place that he had been living, they had to move out and they were in a hotel room, like him and his brother and like their family, like they were living in a hotel room. And my dad was like, I'm trying to like move out and get my own place now. So he was asking everybody for help without actually wanting to do any of the work himself. So that's just to preface what I'm about to read. So then she was just kind of giving him some general advice. She was giving him some ideas like, hey, you can look here, you can do this. And she said, even if you don't have credit, most places will let you in, but you'll have a high deposit. Just ask anywhere. And he said, okay, I thought I was asking for a favor from a friend to help, but you see it as being picky. Okay, and thank you. I'll check there. And then she said, a friend who's giving you advice on how to, and you still hesitating. Okay. And then he said, right, thank you. And then she said, my pleasure, huh? And then he said something about, your feelings are yours alone. I cannot control or fathom those thoughts. And then she said, I was trying to make this conversation a little more positive, but that wasn't the case. And then he said, wait, you were trying to make this conversation positive? For once, or many of times for that matter, I was finally beginning to be vulnerable with someone else, you. And to you, it was more tough love. It's all good. Maybe it was my mistake thinking other thoughts. I know that you have been through so much and will continue to go through so much. My apologies for disturbing you. I wish you well. All right, so here's what we're going to go through some of the red flags that I've seen in these messages. I'm sure there are other ones that you'll probably pick up on, but these are the biggest ones that I have seen him use repeatedly my whole life, and they tend to work. So I'm going to go through these really fast. First one, using big words or more formal words. Okay, so if you'll notice in some of these messages, he says things like I was telling you, like I was making faces about, you're speaking to I once again. Okay, I know where this came from. When I was little, one time I corrected him because, you know, when you're learning grammar things, like you learn grammar rules. And so it's like, I learned it's not you and me, it's you and I. Like that's the proper way to put it. And he used to say you and me all the time. And so I told him one time, hey, it's actually you and I. I think I was like, again, like little. And so ever since then, he started like inserting the term, like the word I in there, thinking it sounds more formal because he thinks but that's not how grammar works. Like that's not what that is. So he put that in several places, right? So he uses more formal speak, even though it's not necessarily correct, and your ears pick up on the fact that that's not correct. All right. Anyway, also, he speaks in a way that he doesn't normally speak in person, it's very formal, all right? Like just even the way that he phrased some of these things. So you're challenging just some of the ways that he phrased these things. I cannot control or fathom those thoughts. I have never heard my dad use the term fathom before in my entire life. All right. Like he starts using these really like I like to call them SAT words, right? He uses these kind of like a little bit bigger words that make them sound like really formal, because it gives kind of like a subconscious like importance and weight and credibility to what he's saying. So people tend to fall for that because he'll start using these bigger words and they get hung up and they go, oh ho ho, the professor, right? Oh, he's so smart. He used a big word. People tend to get distracted by that and don't actually cut through to the content of what he's trying to say. Because oftentimes he just makes it much more complicated than it needs to be because he'll use a bunch of really flowery prose to get his point across. And it's like, just say what you're trying to say. I read you all of these text messages, right? And they were just long paragraphs. It's like literally just say what you need to say. You don't need to put, I saw you at the funeral and I froze, to be honest. And there's just so many ... dots, right? Like it's just all of just very flowery prose. Like you're not Walt Whitman, okay? You never will be. I don't know why no one told you that before, but like it's true. You're not, and you won't be Walt Whitman, okay? So the second thing that I pick up on a lot here is bonding. So there's a lot of, I never told anyone this before, or I never showed anyone this before. He's sending a picture of his mom's grave site, right? Like, I've never, I don't let anybody else see my mom. Like, there's other text messages, like, I've never let anyone else meet her before. Like, this is my mom. Like, he uses it like, oh, I'm letting you in on this secret. We have this special little connection, this special little secret now. I've never showed anyone this. I'm this big, tough, macho Samoan man, you know, and only you get to see the soft side. Only you're able to unlock that side in me. You know, like he said here, where is it? There it is. I was finally beginning to be vulnerable with someone else, you, and to you it was more tough love, right? I was finally beginning to do that. Like, I've never done that before. You're the chosen one. You're so special. He does this, right? It's a lot of flattery. It's a lot of love bombing language. It's a lot of like him trying to make a connection, trying to bond with you. You know, also there was the part where he started speaking Spanish, right? That's another part of like the flattery and the bonding. He doesn't speak Spanish, okay? So he's sitting there talking to this lady and she's correcting his Spanish because he's trying to learn how to speak Spanish with her, okay? And so it's like, you know, teach me how to speak this thing. Now we have this special connection because you're teaching me Spanish. Like, so he does that. That's another form of bonding, okay? The third thing, guess I was wrong. So the manipulative apology. Okay, so as somebody who studies and has done a lot of research, my whole dissertation was on apologies. Watching this and reading him do this, because he's done this so many times, way more times than I can count. This is just a really good example of it. Like, makes me want to scream in a pillow for a very long time, because he sits there and says, you know, my apologies for disturbing you. Like, oh my gosh, you know, I just asked you to do this simple thing and help me and to be a friend, but I guess I was wrong. Like, gross. It's so gross. And he does this like to so many people. He even used to do this to me, and like I did not respond well to it, and so he didn't do it as much later on. But like, it's just so like, it's ick. It gives me such a massive ick when I hear this. Like, just guess I was wrong. Like, I thought we were this. I guess I was wrong. And then usually the girl's response is, oh, no, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't mean to offend you. No, I didn't mean it like that. I'm sorry. That's usually the response, okay? And he knows this. That's why he uses this tool, okay? So don't fall for this. The fourth one is the nice guy trope, all right? Another thing that makes me want to scream so loudly from deep inside of myself. When I first met my boyfriend, and anyone who's known me knows, I have a very firm policy. I will not date a nice guy. If you are a self-proclaimed nice guy, I'm not dating you. Because men who claim to be nice, like, usually there's a red flag there, all right? Like, if you're a nice person and you're a good person, you don't have to verbally say it. People can just see it and read it on you. And that's why, like, the nice guy trope is so cringe to most people, because it's like, ew, like, if you're a nice person, I know you're a nice person. I don't need you to sit there and tell me. Like, I don't, like, it's like, it would be like if I were like, oh, I'm a beautiful person. Like, most people cringe at those types of people. They cringe when you sit there and try to, like, you know, self-adulate, right? So, yeah, gross, massive ick. The nice guy trope, don't do it. Like, I would, no, absolutely not. Not to say my partner's not a nice guy. Okay, he's a very kind person. He's a very nice person. He's never described himself that way, though. He's never said, I'm tired of being the nice guy. I'm tired of being the good guy. Gross. Okay, that's a red flag. The fifth one is a lot of weaponized incompetence, just for good measure. That doesn't necessarily have anything to do with narcissism, but I just wanted to point it out here, because he does this a lot, and he's done this my entire life, where he will intentionally like break something or do something really poorly so you'll come in and fix it for him. He did this in school all the time. He'd be sitting there, you know, writing a paper or working on like a project board or something while he was in college, and I was in high school at the time while he was in college. And he'd come over to our house on purpose, and he would be working on it. And my mom like would see that, because he'd tell her, oh yeah, it's really hard, and tell her about it. My mom would see him floundering and struggling, and she would jump in and help him. And then all of a sudden, you look around and he's just sitting there, just, you know, eating Funyuns, chilling, texting on his phone, you know, like, he's not doing the work. You're doing the work for him all of a sudden. So he would weaponize incompetence all the time. So reading him talking to this lady about, you know, I thought I was asking for a favor from a friend to help, but you see it as picky. She was setting a boundary. She was telling him, I'm not going to do the work for you. I gave you places where you can look for a place to live. I've given you ideas. I've told you what you need to do. You need to do that. That's your responsibility because you're the one who's having this issue, not me. So she was trying to set a boundary, and he was sitting there trying to be like, not only, again, weaponizing his incompetence, but also kind of going back to that guess I was wrong sort of mentality, right? Okay. So as I'm reading these messages, I'm seeing tidbits about myself inserted into these messages. There are pictures of me, specifically this one picture that really like was a big problem for me, the first one that I saw. It was a picture of me and my cousin, okay? The cousin who my mom and I supposedly adopted that we had been told about, okay? And so in this picture, I'm 17. I'm like literally 17 at that time. And it was at my uncle's funeral. And that was like, honestly, the last time I had seen her for like years in between. I hadn't seen her I think it literally been like 10 years. And I saw her like a few years ago. And like, but we don't talk, like we don't communicate. We don't really talk. I don't see her very often. And so like this picture, she's really young and little, and obviously I am too. I was 17 in that picture. I'm 29 now. So he was using this picture. He's sending it out to all these people. He says, these are my 2 daughters. Somehow, because I'd heard the story, right? Like his girlfriend and his girlfriend's sister, they told me this. They told me that he had talked about this and the fact that like, you know, I was raising her, my cousin, okay? And it just hadn't felt really real to me. You know, it wasn't actually confirmed. They had just verbally told me that. I just heard it. I didn't see it, okay? And so actually reading it and seeing my face, he's using my face and her face in a picture to convince people that he has 2 daughters. All right. And mind you, he's been sending these for years. Okay. Even when he and I were estranged, when we weren't talking anymore, he was sending these pictures to people and saying, oh yeah, my daughters. And oh yeah, she's doing this, acting like he was, like he knew, like he was there. And so I found him again, sending this picture to a bunch of different people, a bunch of different, specifically women. All right. So I'm going to pull up the next set of receipts. Okay. So, like, the best ones out, and I'll pop up the picture here, obviously, with my cousin's face blocked out because she doesn't deserve to be dragged into this. Okay. So, in these messages, it's, he sends the picture, and he says, these are my 2 daughters, Taylor, Left, and my cousin. And then the girl says, so beautiful. I love girls and girl stuff. Girls love their daddy. Gross, gross, gross. And then he says, I'm a very private person. No one knows my number or have seen my girls unless I want you to. Yes, girls rules. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. And yes, girls do love their pops. And so it's just gross. It's gross. Like he's using that as a form of connection, talking about us, talking about a story that never happened. So inappropriate, so not okay. All right. Then there's other messages that are just kind of cringy, and I'll read these because why not? And again, it kind of helps to further validate the points that I made before. So you'll probably be picking up on some of those themes that I told you to look out for, and then I'll bring up 2 other ones that I'm reading and coming up with. So then he says, like, they're talking about fear, guilt, pain, and loss of power. She said that. And then he says, do you honestly believe that, and why? Do you want to hear the question? And she says, yes. And he says, LOL, ... Well, it's actually pretty straightforward, ... The question is, ... in a separate text message, would you marry me? Before you answer, I don't mean that figuratively. I mean that question as a form of knowing, if that made any sense. And then she says, huh? And LOL, and then he says, LOL, that's what I said. So he's trying to say that, like, that's a question that somebody else had asked him as, like, a hypothetical, like, philosophical question? Question mark, I think. Because, like, reading through the context, that's kind of what it seems like. But then he asks this lady this, right? Awkward. It's awkward. And then he says, can I be honest? Well, I always want to be honest with you. And then she says, sure. And he says, without sounding like a weirdo or a creepola, ... I knew that you were a reader. I'm a writer, ... I've written something for you. Well, a few things, ... Thoughts mostly, but writing's all the same, ... Pain and trust. Do you know me? Tell me what you want and we'll figure it out together. Are you my friend? Just some of the few names of such writings. So again, mind you, these messages being sent while he's dating, fully has a girlfriend, okay? So this is all happening. And also massive ick and massive cringe. So the things that I want to point out from these messages that you probably should look out for. Constant need for affirmation, right? Not only is he sending it to like this woman, but he's sending messages like this to other women. So it's like there's a rotation, right? Because like we are not available 24/7. So I'm assuming one woman went to work and she couldn't respond, so he would just hit up the next one on his roster, and then he could get the affirmation and attention he needed from that woman. And when she got busy, then he would just switch to the next woman on his roster. All right, so just that constant need for affirmation, that constant need for praise. If your partner or your friend, or like not your friend, but your partner or the person you're romantically interested in is constantly texting, just like rotating out people, constantly texting different people and other people, like to the point where like they don't get overwhelmed by it, but they actually like actively try to start conversations with people. Like I kind of sit there and think like, okay, so do you need, like, are you bored? And so when you're bored, you then reach out and try to get that affirmation. So that's just something I kind of tend to look out for, because it like, especially in the case of my dad, he had a roster. He definitely had a roster of women that he would kind of cycle his way through. The seventh one is persistence, okay? So in a lot of these text messages, you'll see that he sends like 4 messages in a row. He'll just be like, he'll send something, like he'll ask them a question, they'll just say sure, and then he'll send a message, and then he'll send another message, and then he'll send another message, and then they won't respond. And then a day will go by, and then he'll say, I hope all is well with you. I hope God is blessing you on this Saturday. I pray for you daily. Like, he'll send little messages like that in between. He is very persistent. And so persistence can be a good thing, right? Like, as most of these things I feel like can be a good thing within reason, and are normal, relatively normal within reason. However, when it comes to this sort of a situation, it's being used as a form of flattery, right? Like, and it can act as a form of flattery. A lot of the women who I've spoken to who, you know, have had these interactions with my dad, usually they look at that sense of persistence, the fact that he would double text, the fact that he would follow up, all of those types of things, as like very flattering, deeply flattering, because it's like, oh, like you're thinking about me. Oh, like if I don't respond to you, you're going to follow up with me. You're going to check in with me. Like I usually can't get a text back, right? Because in this day and age, it's like, oh, I'm going to look and see how long it takes for you to respond, and then I'm going to wait 2 days to respond. So it's like, when you see somebody who's like constantly checking up and following up with you, it's almost kind of flattering and refreshing in a way, because it's counter culture, right? So just some things that you want to, I'm not telling everybody now to like, you know, take super long to respond to each other. No, just respond like a normal person, however long it takes. But like, I'm just saying, like, if you start to see that persistence, and especially if you've tried to set a boundary, because he did this with me all the time. I would set a boundary when we were not talking and we were estranged. He would constantly try to find ways to insert himself. So he would send me emails, he would send me text messages, he used holidays as a really good excuse to try to reach out to me, and would just, you know, I pray that you're doing well, I hope you're doing well, I hope, you know, and would constantly bring God and prayer and blessings and all of that stuff into the mix, trying to see if he could get anything out of me, any sort of a response out of me. And so he was not respecting the boundary, right? And so he was constantly trying to be persistent. And honestly, it paid off. It worked, right? Because like the estrangement ended. So at a certain point, I kind of broke down and was like, okay, you know what, you're right. Like, I had my reasons for doing it. I don't know if I've talked about that already, but I'll probably talk about that later. But I had my reasons for doing it and for reconnecting with him. But, you know, he was really persistent. Like, he didn't stop, and like, it really upset me at some points. It felt very invasive, and just very inappropriate. But at the same time, you know, it was, it was like, okay, like I think I'm gonna let him back in now. So I can understand that, either from exhaustion, persistence to exhaustion, or persistence to flattering. So just some things to consider, just some things to look out for while you are going through your life journey. Those are some of the things that I picked up on, though, instantly as I was reading his text messages. Now, mind you, I was reading all these text messages on one day, and there's like so many more. We're already at the 35-minute mark, so I'm probably gonna have to cut it here, just because, again, there's so much more to go through, but yeah, there's more on this later. I'm gonna cut it here. I, again, found all of this out in a total of 9 hours, so I'm going through this with you. That was kind of some of the thought processes that were just going on in my brain, and then I had to like try to unload all of this in a very short, compact amount of time on my mom before getting on a plane to Barbados, or to Aruba. So it was crazy. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Please remember to keep an open mind and be kind, because the truth will follow behind.